The silence of the prairie night was broken by a child's soft sob. 8-year-old Sarah lay curled on her thin mattress, clutching her stomach as hunger pangs twisted through her small frame. In the adjacent room, Emma Lawson stared at the empty pantry, moonlight streaming through the cabin window, illuminating the bare shelves that mocked her failure as a mother. Montana Territory, 1876. A place where dreams could flourish or wither like delicate flowers in the unforgiving sun. For Emma, the latter seemed to be her fate. "Mama," Sarah's voice drifted from the bedroom. "My tummy hurts again." Emma closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "I know, sweetheart. Try to sleep. Tomorrow will be better." The words felt hollow, like the promises her husband had made before typhoid fever claimed him last winter. 3 months as a widow, and the farm was failing. The crops had withered in the drought, and most of their livestock had been sold to pay debts. All that remained was a single milk cow, 2 chickens, and the small cabin James had built with his own hands when they'd first claimed this land 5 years ago. Emma sat at the rough-hewn table, her slender fingers tracing the wood grain as she contemplated their options. At 26, she was facing the harsh reality of frontier life alone with a child to feed. Pride had kept her from asking for charity, but pride wouldn't fill Sarah's empty belly. Morning came with a merciless brightness that did nothing to lift Emma's spirits. She milked Bessie, their remaining cow, and gave most of the milk to Sarah, saving just enough to make weak coffee for herself. "Mama, can we have bread today?" Sarah asked, her blue eyes so like her father's wide with hope. "Not today, my love," Emma replied, smoothing her daughter's golden hair, "but we'll have some soon." After breakfast, such as it was, Emma decided she could no longer delay the inevitable. She would have to go into town and either find work or ask for credit at the general store until she could sell some of her needlework. "Sarah, we're going to Willow Creek today," she announced, trying to infuse her voice with a cheerfulness she didn't feel. "To get bread?" Sarah asked eagerly. "We'll see," was all Emma could promise. They hitched Bessie to the small wagon James had built, a contraption that had seen better days but would get them the 5 miles to town. Emma wore her best and only dress not meant for farm work, a faded blue calico that had been let out twice since she'd made it 3 years ago. The journey to Willow Creek passed in relative silence, with Sarah occasionally pointing out a bird or asking about the wildflowers that dotted the prairie. Emma answered automatically, her mind focused on the humiliation that awaited her. Everyone in town knew James Lawson had died, and everyone would know exactly why his widow and child were coming to town with an empty wagon and desperate eyes. Willow Creek was a small settlement, barely deserving of being called a town. A general store, saloon, blacksmith, small church, and a handful of other buildings lined the single dirt street. As Emma guided Bessie down the main thoroughfare, she noticed a commotion near the livery stable. A group of men stood in a loose circle, and at their center was a magnificent black stallion. The horse reared and snorted, fighting against the ropes that held him. Emma instinctively pulled their wagon to a halt, not wanting to spook their gentle cow with the wild display. "Whoa there!" a man's voice called out, deep and commanding. "Easy, boy!" The crowd parted slightly, revealing a tall figure in dust-covered clothing. His broad shoulders strained against a faded blue shirt as he worked to calm the stallion. A worn cowboy hat shaded his face, but Emma could see the determined set of his jaw beneath several days' worth of stubble. "That's Caleb Nicholson," whispered an old woman who had stopped beside Emma's wagon. "Just rode in yesterday. Bought that beast from old Jenkins for a small fortune. Some say he's running from something back east." Emma nodded politely but paid little attention to the gossip. Newcomers to these parts always inspired speculation. What concerned her more was getting to the general store and finding a way to feed her daughter. "Come along, Sarah," she said, helping the child down from the wagon after securing Bessie to a hitching post. As they walked toward Wilbur's general store, Emma felt eyes upon them. She kept her head high despite the threadbare quality of her dress and the visible thinness of her daughter's face. A woman's pride was sometimes all she had out here, and Emma Lawson still had plenty of that. The bell above the door jingled as they entered the store. Mr. Wilbur, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger. "Mrs. Lawson," he greeted with a nod. "What can I do for you today?" Emma swallowed hard. "Mr. Wilbur, I was hoping we might discuss an arrangement." She glanced down at Sarah, who had wandered to stare longingly at a barrel of hard candies near the counter. "Perhaps we could speak privately?" Understanding crossed the shopkeeper's face. He called to his wife to watch the counter, then gestured for Emma to follow him to a small office at the back of the store. "Mrs. Lawson, I respect you coming to me directly," Mr. Wilbur began once they were seated. "But I must be honest. I've already extended credit to 3 families who lost their crops in the drought. The store is my livelihood, and I cannot—" "I understand," Emma interrupted, not wanting to hear the words that would confirm her worst fears. "I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Wilbur. I can work. I can sew, clean, cook." "Emma," the older man said gently, using her first name in a paternal manner, "there's little work to be had. The drought has affected everyone." "Then perhaps just a small amount of flour," she pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just enough for bread. Sarah hasn't had bread in days." The shopkeeper's face softened with sympathy, but his words remained firm. "I wish I could help. Truly I do. But—" The office door opened suddenly, revealing Mrs. Wilbur. "Pardon the interruption, but there's someone asking for Mrs. Lawson." Puzzled, Emma rose and followed Mrs. Wilbur back to the store's main room. Sarah was exactly where Emma had left her, still gazing at the candy, but now there was someone else present. The cowboy from earlier, Caleb Nicholson, stood near the counter, his hat in his hands. Up close, Emma could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with eyes the color of a summer sky and hair, the shade of burnished copper where the sun had lightened it. "Mrs. Lawson?" he inquired, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone who'd spent time further south. "Yes," she replied cautiously, wondering what business this stranger could have with her. "I heard you might be looking for work," he said, turning his hat in his hands. "I've just purchased the old McAllister place and could use some help getting it in order." Emma blinked in surprise. The McAllister ranch had been abandoned for nearly 2 years after the family had given up and moved back east. It was a substantial property with good grazing land, though the house itself had fallen into disrepair. "What kind of help?" she asked, suddenly wary. A single woman had to be careful about such offers, especially from unmarried men. As if sensing her concern, Caleb quickly added, "Cooking, primarily. I've hired a few hands to help with the cattle I'm bringing in, and none of us can do more than burn coffee. I'd pay fair wages." He looked down at Sarah, who was now watching the exchange with interest. "The position would include room and board, of course, for both of you." Before Emma could respond, Sarah's stomach growled audibly in the quiet store. The child's face flushed with embarrassment, and Emma felt a stab of maternal pain. Caleb's expression softened. Without a word, he turned to Mr. Wilbur. "I'll need supplies for the ranch. Let's start with flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and salted pork." As he listed items, he nodded toward Sarah. "And some of those candies for the young lady, if that's all right with her mother." Mr. Wilbur began gathering the requested items while Emma stood in stunned silence. Was this man offering charity disguised as employment? The thought both relieved and mortified her. "Mr. Nicholson, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept—" "It's not charity, Mrs. Lawson," he interrupted, as if reading her thoughts. "I genuinely need help, and from what I've heard around town, you're known for keeping a good home. I'm offering fair payment for honest work." He glanced at Sarah again. "Though I would understand if you're reluctant to relocate." Emma considered her options, which were painfully few. Stay at their failing farm and watch her daughter go hungry, or accept this stranger's offer of work. "When would you need me to start?" she asked finally. "As soon as you're able," Caleb replied. "The cattle arrive in 3 days." While they spoke, Mr. Wilbur had assembled a substantial order. As Caleb paid, he requested that a sack of flour be set aside. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, turning back to her, "I understand you might need time to consider. In the meantime, perhaps this will help." He lifted the sack of flour and carried it to the small table near the store's window, where Sarah now sat. Her daughter was hungry for bread. The cowboy set down a sack of flour on her table. The simple gesture, performed without fanfare or expectation, nearly broke Emma's composure. She felt tears threaten but forced them back. "Thank you," she managed, the words inadequate for the flood of gratitude she felt. "I'll be at the ranch starting tomorrow," Caleb said, settling his hat back on his head. "Take your time deciding. The offer stands." With a tip of his hat to Emma and a gentle smile for Sarah, he left the store. Emma stared at the sack of flour, equal parts relief and uncertainty washing through her. She had no illusions about the difficulty of frontier life, especially for a woman alone. Taking a position in a man's household would invite gossip, but staying on their failing farm would mean continued hunger. "Mama," Sarah's voice broke through her thoughts, "can we make bread now?" Looking into her daughter's hopeful face, Emma made her decision. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll make bread today. And tomorrow we're going to pack our things. We've been offered a new start." 3 days later, Emma and Sarah Lawson arrived at the McAllister Ranch, now the Nicholson Ranch, with their few possessions loaded in their small wagon. The main house was larger than their cabin, but showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, a sagging porch step, and windows filmed with dust. Caleb Nicholson emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Behind him, 2 other men continued working with the horses. "Mrs. Lawson," he greeted, coming to help her down from the wagon. "I'm glad you decided to come." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Nicholson," she replied formally, trying to ignore the warmth of his hand as he assisted her. "We're grateful." Caleb showed them to their quarters, a small but clean room at the back of the house with a connecting door to the kitchen. "I hope this will be suitable," he said. The previous owners had help that lived in. "It's perfect," Emma assured him, noting with relief that it was spacious enough for both her and Sarah, with a bed for each of them, luxury compared to their shared mattress at the farm. "The ranch hands will stay in the bunkhouse," Caleb explained. "There will be 5 in total, including the foreman, Chester Riley. He's been working these parts for 20 years and knows the land better than anyone." Emma nodded, mentally preparing for cooking for 6 men plus herself and Sarah. It would be work, but honest work that would keep her daughter fed. "I'll leave you to get settled," Caleb said. "Supper at 6? "We'll be ready," Emma promised. As Caleb left, Sarah bounced onto one of the beds. "Mama, it's so soft, and look how big it is." Emma smiled, feeling a cautious hope bloom within her. Perhaps this arrangement would work out after all. That evening, Emma prepared a simple but hearty meal of beans, biscuits, and salt pork with the supplies Caleb had provided. The ranch hands ate with the enthusiastic appreciation of men who'd gone too long without a proper meal, and Caleb himself complimented her cooking with genuine praise. "Mrs. Lawson, if all your meals are this good, we'll have to expand the bunkhouse to accommodate the men who'll be lining up to work here," he said with a smile that transformed his weathered face. Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. It's nothing fancy." "After months of my cooking, this is a feast," he assured her. As the days passed, Emma settled into a routine. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, spent the mornings cleaning and putting the neglected house in order, prepared lunch for the men, and then tackled the afternoon's chores before beginning supper. Sarah helped where she could, but also spent time exploring the ranch under the watchful eyes of Chester, the foreman, who had taken a grandfatherly interest in the child. Emma learned more about Caleb through observation and the inevitable ranch gossip. He had indeed come from back east Pennsylvania, specifically where he'd worked in his family's shipping business. When his parents died within months of each other, he'd sold the business and headed west with dreams of ranching. He was knowledgeable about business, but learning about cattle, which explained his heavy reliance on Chester's expertise. What struck Emma most was Caleb's kindness. He treated his men fairly, spoke gently to her daughter, and maintained a respectful distance from Emma herself that put her increasingly at ease. He was unfailingly polite, referring to her as Mrs. Lawson, despite her first name being spoken freely by the other ranch hands. 2 weeks after their arrival, Emma was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shielding her eyes from the sun, she saw Caleb returning from town with supplies. What caught her attention was the small package tied to his saddle. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Lawson," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "Perfect day for drying clothes." "Indeed," she agreed, pinning one of her few dresses to the line. "How was town?" "Productive." He untied the package and approached, seeming almost nervous. "I, saw this and thought of Sarah." He held out a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Emma took it curiously and unwrapped it to reveal a book, Fairy Tales for Children, with colorful illustrations. "Sarah mentioned she enjoyed stories," Caleb explained. "I thought this might help pass the evenings." Emma was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Nicholson. She'll be thrilled." "Please call me Caleb," he said suddenly. "All this Mr. Nicholson makes me feel like my father." Emma hesitated, aware of the familiarity this represented, but his open expression convinced her. "Thank you, Caleb. And you may call me Emma if you wish." He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes and caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you." That evening, after supper was cleared and the men had retired to the bunkhouse, Caleb joined Emma and Sarah on the porch. The summer night was pleasantly cool, with a chorus of crickets providing nature's music. "Did you like the book, Sarah?" Caleb asked as the child clutched it to her chest. "Oh, yes, sir. Mama's going to read me a story before bed," Sarah replied eagerly. "Would you like to hear one now?" Emma offered, opening the book. As she read, Emma was acutely aware of Caleb beside her, his tall frame relaxed in the rocking chair, his eyes sometimes on the book and sometimes on her. When Sarah began to yawn, Emma closed the book. "Time for bed, young lady," she said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "Good night, Mr. Caleb," Sarah said, surprising both adults by giving the rancher a quick hug before scampering inside. "Good night, Miss Sarah," he called after her, a fond expression softening his features. After settling Sarah in bed, Emma returned to the porch, unsure if Caleb would still be there, but finding herself hoping he would be. He was, his gaze fixed on the stars above. "She's a wonderful child," he said as Emma reclaimed her chair. "You've done well with her, especially under difficult circumstances." "Thank you," Emma replied. "It hasn't been easy since James died, but she gives me reason to keep going." "How long were you married?" Caleb asked gently. 9 years. We came west right after we wed. James had dreams of building something of our own, away from his family's expectations in Boston." Emma smiled at the memory. He was so determined, so full of plans. "I'm sorry for your loss," Caleb said, his voice sincere. "I understand what it's like to lose family." "Your parents," Emma nodded. "The men mentioned you lost them recently." "Within 3 months of each other," Caleb confirmed. "My mother to pneumonia, my father to what the doctor called a broken heart, though it presented as a stroke." He paused. "After they were gone, the business that had been in our family for generations just seemed empty. I needed a new start." "So you came west to be a rancher," Emma observed. "Quite a change from shipping." Caleb chuckled. "More than I anticipated, to be honest. But I've always loved the idea of open spaces and building something with my own hands, not just managing what was handed to me." He glanced at her. "I suppose that sounds foolish to someone who's lived the reality of frontier life." "Not foolish," Emma corrected. "Brave. It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind for a dream." They fell into comfortable silence, rocking gently as the moon rose higher. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd sat peacefully like this, without worrying about tomorrow's meal or the next crisis. It felt dangerously like contentment. "I should turn in," she said finally, rising from her chair. "Breakfast comes early." "Emma," Caleb said, standing as well, "I'm glad you decided to come here. The place already feels more like a home with you and Sarah in it." His words caused that flutter in her chest again, a sensation she hadn't felt since James courted her years ago. "Good night, Caleb," she said softly, retreating inside before she could examine the feeling too closely. As summer progressed toward autumn, the Nicholson ranch began to transform. Under Caleb's direction and Chester's expertise, the neglected property slowly came to life. Fences were mended, outbuildings repaired, and the herd of cattle grew as Caleb made strategic purchases at livestock auctions. The house, too, underwent a revival under Emma's care. Floors that had been dull with dust now gleamed, windows sparkled in the sunlight, and fresh curtains sewn by Emma from fabric Caleb had brought from town adorned them. Wildflowers in mason jars decorated the tables, bringing color and life to rooms that had stood empty for too long. Sarah thrived in the ranch environment, helping Emma with simple chores and spending hours watching the men work with the horses. Caleb began teaching her to ride on a gentle mare with Emma's cautious permission. The girl's thin frame filled out with regular meals, and her laughter became a common sound around the property. For Emma, the changes were more complex. Her body regained strength from regular meals and work that, while demanding, didn't tax her to exhaustion as the failing farm had. But it was her spirit that underwent the most profound transformation. The constant gnawing fear of hunger and failure began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of security and purpose. And then there was Caleb. Their evening conversations on the porch had become a ritual, a quiet time after Sarah was in bed and the day's work complete. They spoke of the books they had read, places they had seen, and sometimes shared the deeper pains and joys of their pasts. Emma found herself looking forward to these moments with an anticipation that both excited and alarmed her. One evening in late August, as a thunderstorm threatened on the horizon, Caleb surprised her by asking about her life before James. "I was quite ordinary," Emma admitted with a small laugh, "the third daughter of a professor at a small college in Vermont. My father taught literature, so our home was full of books but not much else. We weren't poor, but there was little extra." "And how did you meet your husband?" Caleb asked, watching her face in the soft light from the window behind them. "James came to study under my father," Emma explained. "He was brilliant but restless, always dreaming of adventures beyond the classroom. He used to say that books were wonderful, but they were no substitute for living." She smiled at the memory. "He courted me with poetry and promises of seeing the world together." "And did you?" "See the world?" Emma's smile turned wistful. "We saw the prairie. We saw mountains in the distance. It wasn't the world he had promised, but it was beautiful in its own way. And it was ours." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that desire for something of your own. That's what brought me here." "And are you finding what you sought?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. Caleb's gaze met hers, intense and searching. "I'm beginning to," he said softly. The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering on the porch roof above them. In the distance, lightning illuminated the vast prairie. "We should go in," Emma suggested, suddenly aware of how alone they were, how intimate the moment felt. As they stood, a particularly bright flash of lightning was followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Emma, startled, instinctively stepping closer to Caleb. His hand found her elbow to steady her, the touch sending warmth through her even as the temperature dropped with the approaching storm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," she replied, but didn't move away. "I've never liked storms." They stood there, closer than they had ever been, as the rain began to fall harder. Emma could smell the clean scent of soap on his skin, feel the strength in the hand that still rested lightly on her arm. "Emma," Caleb began, his voice husky with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. The moment was broken by Sarah's frightened cry from inside. "Mama!" Emma pulled away, reality crashing back. "I should go to her. She fears storms as well." Caleb nodded, stepping back. "Of course. Good night, Emma." "Good night, Caleb," she replied, hurrying inside to comfort her daughter, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, the relationship between Emma and Caleb continued to deepen. They never spoke of the moment during the thunderstorm, but something had shifted between them. Caleb's gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, and Emma found herself taking extra care with her appearance each morning. Sarah, with a child's innocent perception, began to ask questions that Emma found increasingly difficult to answer. "Mama, do you like Mr. Caleb?" she asked one evening as Emma tucked her into bed. "Of course I do. Emma replied carefully. He's a kind employer and has been very good to us. Sarah shook her head, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. No, I mean, do you like him like you liked Papa? You smile when he talks and your cheeks get pink. Emma felt those very cheeks warm at her daughter's observation. It's complicated, Sarah. Mr. Caleb is our employer, and we're still grieving for your father. But Papa would want us to be happy, Sarah insisted with the simple logic of childhood, and Mr. Caleb makes us happy, doesn't he? Emma kissed her daughter's forehead, evading the question. Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow's a busy day. The busy day Sarah referred to was the arrival of supplies and furniture Caleb had ordered from Denver. The ranch was prospering, and he decided it was time to properly furnish the house beyond the basic necessities they'd been using. The wagon arrived mid-morning, laden with crates and carefully wrapped parcels. Emma directed the deliverymen as they brought in a new dining table and chairs, a settee for the parlor, rugs, lamps, and various smaller items that would transform the sparse house into a true home. As the last crate was opened, Emma gasped. Inside was a piano, not a grand instrument like those in wealthy Eastern homes, but a lovely upright with gleaming wood and ivory keys. Do you like it? Caleb's voice came from behind her. He had been in the barn when the delivery arrived, but had apparently finished his work in time to see her reaction. It's beautiful, Emma breathed, running her fingers lightly over the keys, but surely too extravagant. Not at all, Caleb insisted. You mentioned you played as a girl, and I thought it would bring some culture to our remote corner of the world. He paused, suddenly looking uncertain. That is, if you're willing to play. Emma sat on the bench, positioning her hands on the keys. It had been years since she'd played regularly, but her fingers remembered. She began a simple melody, one her mother had taught her, and felt joy rise within her as music filled the room for the first time. Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound, her eyes wide with wonder. Mama, it's so pretty. Would you like to learn? Emma asked, making room on the bench. As Sarah eagerly joined her, Emma glanced up to find Caleb watching them, his expression so tender it made her heart ache. That evening, after Sarah was asleep, Emma returned to the piano. The house was quiet, the men having retired to the bunkhouse after a long day's work. She played softly, letting the music express emotions she couldn't voice. That's beautiful, Caleb said from the parlor doorway, startling her. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's all right, Emma assured him, her fingers stilling on the keys. I was just remembering some old pieces. Caleb entered the room and sat in one of the new armchairs. My mother played, he said. Not as well as you, but she loved music. Our home was never silent. Music does bring life to a house, Emma agreed, closing the piano lid and joining him in the sitting area. Emma, Caleb began after a moment, his tone serious. I need to ask you something. Her heart quickened. Yes? Are you happy here? The question was simple, but loaded with unspoken meaning. I am, she answered honestly. Sarah and I both are. You've given us security when we had none. Is that all I've given you? Caleb pressed, leaning forward slightly. Security? Emma felt heat rise to her face. What are you asking, Caleb? He stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand in his. I'm asking if you might consider making this arrangement permanent. Not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. Though she had begun to suspect his feelings, the directness of the proposal took Emma's breath away. Caleb, I know it hasn't been long, he hurried on, and I know you still honor your husband's memory. I would never ask you to forget him, but I've grown to care for you deeply, Emma, and for Sarah as well. I want to provide for you both, protect you, build a life with you. Emma looked into his earnest blue eyes and saw genuine emotion there. Part of her heart soared at his words, but another part, the cautious widow who had learned the harshness of life, held back. You're a good man, Caleb, she said softly, and I can't deny that I've developed feelings for you. But marriage is a serious step, especially when a child is involved. I understand, he said, though disappointment flickered across his face. I don't ask for an answer tonight. Just promise you'll consider it. I will, Emma agreed, squeezing his hand gently. Caleb raised her hand to his lips and placed a soft kiss on her knuckles, a gesture so tender it brought tears to Emma's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered before releasing her hand and standing. "Good night, Emma." After he left, Emma remained in the parlor, her emotions in tumult. She had not expected to find love again after James, had not sought it, had believed that chapter of her life was closed. Yet, here it was, offered sincerely by a good man who had already proven his kindness and character. But was she ready? And would accepting his proposal dishonor James's memory? These questions followed her to bed and kept her awake long into the night. The next morning, Emma rose early as usual to prepare breakfast, her mind still wrestling with Caleb's proposal. She had just begun mixing biscuit dough when the kitchen door opened. Expecting one of the ranch hands coming for early coffee, she was surprised to see Chester, the foreman, with a grave expression. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, removing his hat, "I need to speak with you." Something in his tone made Emma wipe her hands immediately. "What is it, Chester?" "There's been talk in town," he began uncomfortably. "Gossip about you and the boss living under the same roof." Emma felt her cheeks flush. "I'm employed as the housekeeper, with my daughter present at all times. There's nothing improper." "I know that, madam," Chester interrupted gently, "and those who know you both know it too. But there are others, particularly that busybody Mrs. Peterson at the Mercantile, spreading tales." He hesitated. "And now with the new furniture and piano being delivered, folks are saying he's setting you up as, well, not as a proper wife." Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the table to steady herself. She had been naive to think their arrangement wouldn't invite speculation, but she hadn't anticipated this level of malicious gossip. "Thank you for telling me, Chester," she said, striving for composure. "I appreciate your honesty." The foreman twisted his hat in his hands. "There's more, Mrs. Lawson. The boss was in town yesterday and overheard some men at the saloon repeating these rumors." He confronted them. There was an altercation. "An altercation?" Emma echoed, alarmed. "Was he hurt?" "Nothing serious," Chester assured her. "A split lip, bruised knuckles. He gave better than he got, but it's escalated matters. Now everyone's talking about him fighting to defend your honor." After Chester left, Emma stood motionless in the kitchen, dough forgotten on the counter. This complicated everything. Caleb had physically fought to protect her reputation, an action that, while chivalrous, would only fuel the gossip. When Caleb entered the kitchen 30 minutes later, Emma saw the evidence of the fight immediately. His lower lip was swollen, and a bruise darkened one cheekbone. "Good morning," he greeted, seemingly unaware of her distress. "Something smells wonderful." "Chester told me what happened in town," Emma said without preamble. "About the fight, about the gossip." Caleb's expression hardened. "He shouldn't have worried you with that." "I needed to know," Emma insisted. "This affects me directly, Caleb. My reputation, Sarah's future." "Which is exactly why I couldn't let those men speak about you that way," Caleb interrupted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. More quietly, he added, "I'm sorry if my actions made things worse, but I won't apologize for defending you." Emma moved to the stove, needing physical distance as she sorted through her emotions. "What exactly did they say?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Nothing worth repeating. Crude speculations about our arrangement here. And now everyone knows you fought over me," Emma concluded, turning back to face him, "which only confirms in their minds that there's something to gossip about." "Or confirms that I care enough about your reputation to defend it," Caleb countered. Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival in the kitchen, her hair still tousled from sleep. She stopped short when she saw Caleb's face. "Mr. Caleb, you're hurt," she exclaimed, rushing to him with concern. "It's nothing, sweetheart," he assured her, kneeling to her level. "Just a little accident." Sarah reached up to touch the bruise with gentle fingers, her face serious. "Mama can fix it. She always makes hurts better." The simple statement hung in the air between the adults, loaded with unintended meaning. Emma felt tears threaten as she watched Caleb's tender interaction with her daughter. "Breakfast will be ready soon," Emma said, turning back to her neglected dough. "Sarah, please set the table." As her daughter busied herself with plates and cutlery, Emma felt Caleb's presence behind her. "We need to finish this conversation," he said quietly. "After breakfast?" Emma nodded without turning, not trusting her voice. She heard him sigh before leaving the kitchen, presumably to call the ranch hands in for the meal. After a somewhat tense breakfast, during which the men carefully avoided mentioning Caleb's injuries, Emma sent Sarah outside to gather eggs and faced Caleb across the cleared table. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Caleb's expression brightened with hope. "And?" "The gossip changes things," Emma continued. "If I accept you now, everyone will believe I did so because my reputation was compromised, that I had no choice." "That's absurd," Caleb protested. "Anyone who knows you—" "Most people don't know me, Caleb," Emma interrupted. "They see a widow working in a bachelor's home and draw their own conclusions. And now they'll see a hasty marriage and believe those conclusions were correct." Frustration crossed Caleb's face. "So what are you saying? That we should deny our feelings because of small-minded gossip?" "I'm saying I need time," Emma clarified. "Time for the talk to die down. Time to be certain of my own heart." Caleb was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Finally, he nodded. "I understand. I won't pressure you, Emma. But I also won't retract my offer. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." The weeks that followed were strained. Emma continued her duties as housekeeper, and Caleb remained unfailingly polite, but the easy camaraderie they had developed was replaced by a careful formality that pained them both. Their evening conversations on the porch ceased, with Caleb often working late in the barn or riding out to check the herd after supper. Sarah noticed the change and questioned Emma about it one night as they prepared for bed. "Why is Mr. Caleb sad?" she asked, her small face serious in the lamplight. "Is it because of his hurt face?" Emma brushed her daughter's hair, considering how to answer. "Mr. Caleb has a lot on his mind with the ranch," she said finally. "Running a cattle operation is hard work." Sarah wasn't satisfied. "He was happy before, even with all the work. Now he doesn't smile at breakfast, and he doesn't read me stories anymore." Emma felt a pang of guilt. In protecting her pride and reputation, she had inadvertently denied Sarah the growing bond with Caleb that had clearly meant so much to her. "Would you like me to ask if he'll read to you tomorrow night?" Emma offered. Sarah nodded eagerly. "The story about the princess and the mountain, that's his favorite." The next day, Emma found Caleb in the barn, checking the tack before a planned ride to the north pasture. She hesitated in the doorway, watching as his capable hands worked with the leather straps of a bridle. "Caleb," she called softly. He turned, surprise evident on his face. "Emma, do you need something?" "Sarah was hoping you might read to her tonight," Emma said, stepping into the barn's dim interior. "She misses your stories." A series of emotions crossed Caleb's face: pleasure, pain, longing. "Of course," he agreed. "I've missed our reading time too." Emma moved closer, gathering her courage. "And I've missed our conversations," she admitted. "I've missed you." Caleb set down the bridle and faced her fully, hope dawning in his eyes. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm still thinking," Emma clarified. "But I don't want this awkwardness between us while I do." Caleb nodded slowly. "Nor do I." He paused, then added, "I rode into town yesterday. The gossip is already finding new targets. Apparently the blacksmith's daughter was seen riding unchaperoned with a cowboy from the Gregory spread." Emma smiled despite herself. Small towns have short memories for old scandals when fresh ones appear. "Indeed," Caleb agreed, returning her smile. That evening, after supper, Caleb read to Sarah as promised. Emma sat nearby with her mending, watching the two of them together. Sarah nestled against Caleb's side, his deep voice bringing the story to life, his arm protectively around her small shoulders. They looked like father and daughter, so natural together that it made Emma's heart ache with both joy and uncertainty. When Sarah was asleep, Caleb and Emma found themselves on the porch once again, resuming their ritual as if the strained weeks had never happened. "I've been thinking about expanding the herd next spring," Caleb said, rocking gently in his chair. "Chester says the south pasture could support another 100 head. The ranch is doing well then? Emma asked. Better than I hoped, Caleb confirmed. We'll turn a profit this year. Even with all the improvements, he glanced at her. I've been thinking of building an addition to the house as well, another bedroom or two. The implication hung in the air between them. More bedrooms meant a growing family, a future that included Emma and Sarah permanently. That would be nice, Emma said carefully. This place deserves to be filled with family. Caleb's expression grew serious. Emma, I know you asked for time, and I'm trying to respect that. But I need to know if there's any hope. If you could ever see me as more than your employer. Emma looked out at the darkened prairie, gathering her thoughts. When James died, I thought that part of my life was over, she said finally. I never expected to feel this way again, to care for someone, to imagine a future together. She turned to face him. But I do care for you, Caleb. Deeply. Then what's holding you back? He asked gently. Fear, Emma admitted. Fear that I'm rushing into this out of gratitude or security. Fear that I'll lose you too, the way I lost James. Fear that it's too soon, that I'm somehow betraying his memory. Caleb reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. James loved you enough to bring you west, to build a life with you. Would he want you to remain alone, denying yourself and Sarah a chance at happiness? Tears filled Emma's eyes as she considered his words. No, she whispered, he wouldn't. I can't promise we won't face hardships, Caleb continued. This life guarantees that. But I can promise to face them with you, to care for you and Sarah, to build something lasting together. Emma looked at their joined hands, his larger one encompassing hers just as he had encompassed her life and heart in the months since that day he'd set a sack of flour on her table. Yes, she said simply. Caleb stared at her as if afraid he'd misheard. Yes? Emma smiled through her tears. Yes, Caleb Nicholson, I will marry you. In an instant, he was kneeling before her chair, gathering her into his arms with a joy that erased all the tension of the previous weeks. His lips found hers in a first kiss that was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I'll make you happy, Emma, I swear it. You already do, she assured him, marveling at how right it felt to be in his arms, how naturally their hearts had found each other despite all the obstacles. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek. The entire town attended, any lingering gossip silenced by the obvious love between bride and groom and the joy of little Sarah, who proudly served as flower girl. Emma wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Caleb had ordered from Denver, with a wreath of late autumn wildflowers in her hair. Caleb, resplendent in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle on Chester's arm, the foreman having offered to give her away. Who gives this woman to be married? The preacher asked. I do, Chester replied, his weathered face solemn with the honor. Then, in a quieter voice meant only for Caleb, he added, Take care of her, boss. With my life, Caleb promised, taking Emma's hand. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with traditional vows spoken in voices steady with conviction. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb's kiss was both reverent and possessive, claiming Emma as his partner in all things. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns hanging from tree branches. The women of Willow Creek had contributed dishes for a feast that would be remembered for years to come, and someone brought a fiddle for dancing. As the sun set, casting golden light across the gathering, Caleb led Emma in their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together as if they'd been dancing for years, his hand warm at the small of her back, her head eventually coming to rest against his shoulder. Happy Mrs. Nicholson, he murmured against her hair. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Emma. Perfectly, she assured him. Later, after the guests had departed and Sarah was asleep in her room, now officially hers alone, Caleb carried Emma across the threshold of the master bedroom. It had been transformed with new furnishings, including a large bed with a handmade quilt and fresh flowers on the dresser. Welcome home, he said, setting her gently on her feet. It's beautiful, Emma breathed, taking in the room that would be theirs. Caleb's arms encircled her from behind, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. Not as beautiful as you. Emma turned in his embrace, her hands coming up to frame his face. I never thought I'd find this again, she confessed. Love, partnership, a future to look forward to. Neither did I, Caleb admitted. I came west looking for a new beginning, but I found so much more. His hands spanned her waist, drawing her closer. I found you. Their lips met in a kiss that deepened quickly, months of restrained desire finally finding expression. As Caleb's hands moved to the buttons of her dress, Emma surrendered to the love she had found in the most unexpected of places, with a man whose generosity had begun with a simple sack of flour and grown into a lifetime of promise. Winter on the Montana prairie brought howling blizzards that confined the household to the warmth of the ranch house for days at a time. But within those walls, Emma found a contentment she had never known. Married life with Caleb exceeded her hopes, his tenderness as a husband matched by his growing confidence as a rancher and his devotion as a father to Sarah, who now called him Papa Caleb, with unrestrained affection. Emma's days were still filled with cooking and household management, but now as the mistress of the home rather than an employee. Caleb insisted they hire additional help, a young woman from town who came daily to assist with the heavier cleaning and laundry, giving Emma more time to pursue her music and to teach Sarah both piano and her letters. On Christmas morning, Emma woke to find Caleb watching her, his blue eyes soft with love in the gray dawn light filtering through the window. "Merry Christmas," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Merry Christmas," she replied, nestling closer in the warmth of their bed, though I suspect Sarah will be bursting in any moment. As if summoned by her words, their bedroom door flew open, and Sarah bounded in, still in her nightgown. "It's Christmas! Papa Caleb, Mama, Santa came!" Caleb laughed, catching the excited child as she launched herself onto the bed. "Did he now? And how do you know that, Miss Sarah?" "There are packages under the tree that weren't there last night," Sarah reported, bouncing with anticipation. "Can we open them, please?" Emma exchanged an amused glance with her husband. "I suppose we should," she agreed, "but breakfast first." The morning passed in a haze of joy as Sarah opened her gifts, a doll with a porcelain face, a new coat, books, and a small locket containing miniature portraits of her mother and Caleb that he had commissioned on his last trip to Helena. "It's the most beautiful thing ever," Sarah declared, throwing her arms around Caleb's neck. "Thank you, Papa Caleb." Emma watched the exchange with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the perfect happiness of the moment. When Sarah moved on to examining her other presents, Caleb approached Emma with a small package. "For you," he said, placing it in her hands. Emma unwrapped it carefully to reveal a jewelry box. Inside nestled a brooch of gold and pearls, elegant but not ostentatious, perfectly suited to her taste. "Caleb, it's exquisite," she breathed. "There's an inscription on the back," he told her. Emma turned the brooch over to find delicately engraved words. "To Emma, who turned a house into a home, all my love see." "Oh, Caleb," she whispered, tears threatening again. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a package of her own. "Now yours." Caleb opened it to find a pocket watch, silver and gleaming. "It's magnificent," he said, examining it carefully. "Open it," Emma instructed. Inside, she had arranged for an inscription similar to the one he had given her. "To Caleb, who brought flour and found a family. Forever yours, E." His eyes met hers, recognition of the reference bringing a tender smile to his face. "The best decision I ever made," he said softly, leaning in to kiss her. "Ugh, kissing again," Sarah commented from her place by the tree, though her giggle belied any real disgust. As winter yielded to spring, the ranch flourished under Caleb's increasingly confident management. The cattle herd grew, as did the horse stock, with Caleb developing a reputation for breeding quality mounts suited to the harsh Montana conditions. Emma found herself busier than ever, not only with household duties, but also with social obligations as the Nicholson Ranch became a center for community gatherings. She hosted dinners for neighboring ranchers and their wives, organized a successful harvest festival in the fall, and even began a small reading circle for the women of Willow Creek that met monthly at the ranch. Through it all, her partnership with Caleb deepened. They faced challenges together: a late spring blizzard that threatened newborn calves, a dispute with a neighboring rancher over water rights, a bout of influenza that swept through the bunkhouse and emerged stronger for having weathered them side by side. As their first anniversary approached, Emma realized with surprise that she had news to share with her husband. The subtle signs had been present for weeks, but she'd been too busy to notice until her dresses began to feel snug around the waist. She chose to tell him on the anniversary of the day they met, the day he had placed that sack of flour on her table when Sarah was hungry for bread. After Sarah was in bed, Emma found Caleb in his study, reviewing ledgers for the ranch. She watched him for a moment from the doorway. This man who had transformed her life with an act of kindness that had grown into enduring love. "Do you know what day it is?" she asked, entering the room. Caleb looked up, his face softening at the sight of her. "Tuesday," Emma laughed. "Well, yes, but it's also been exactly 1 year since a certain cowboy set down a sack of flour on my table." Recognition dawned in Caleb's eyes. "So it has," he agreed, setting aside his ledger and opening his arms to her. "The day I met the woman who would become my heart." Emma settled onto his lap, her head resting against his shoulder. "You saved us that day." "Sarah and me." "You saved me too," Caleb corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I was just a man with money and dreams trying to build something meaningful. You gave me purpose, family, love." Emma took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "And now you've given me another gift," she said softly. Caleb froze, his eyes widening as he processed her meaning. "Emma, are you saying—" "Yes," she confirmed, joy bubbling through her. "We're going to have a baby." The wonder that transformed Caleb's face was something Emma knew she would remember always. His hand spread protectively over her still flat abdomen, and tears shone in his eyes. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child," Emma nodded, her own eyes damp. "Due in November, according to my calculations." Caleb gathered her closer, his embrace gentle as if she had suddenly become fragile. "I love you, Emma Nicholson," he whispered fiercely. "You and Sarah and this new life we've created. You're everything to me." "And you to us," Emma assured him, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of all they had shared and all that was yet to come. Their life together had begun with flour for bread, a simple act of kindness that had blossomed into love. Now, with a growing family and a thriving ranch, Emma knew that the hunger she had once feared would never return. In its place was abundance of love, of purpose, of joy. November brought an early snowfall, and with it, the birth of William James Nicholson, a robust boy with his father's copper hair and his mother's determined spirit. Sarah, thrilled with her role as big sister, appointed herself his special guardian and spent hours watching over his cradle. As Christmas approached, Emma sat in the rocking chair by the nursery window, nursing William while watching Caleb and Sarah build a snowman in the yard below. Their laughter drifted up to her, a counterpoint to the contented sounds of her nursing son. Life had come full circle, Emma realized, from hunger to abundance, from loneliness to love, from uncertainty to purpose, all because a kind-hearted cowboy had recognized a need and filled it, setting in motion a journey that had brought them all to this perfect moment of belonging. William finished nursing and gazed up at her with eyes that were already showing hints of his father's blue. Emma kissed his downy head, breathing in the sweet scent of him. "Your papa is a good man," she told him softly, "the best of men. And one day, I'll tell you the story of how he came into our lives with a sack of flour and changed everything." From the yard below, Caleb looked up and caught sight of her in the window. He smiled and raised a hand in greeting, love evident even at a distance. Emma returned the gesture, her heart full to overflowing. This was her family. This was her home. This was the love story that had begun with hunger and flour and had grown into a legacy that would endure for generations to come.